Picture this. You are sitting inside a vaulted obsidian chamber on the third moon of Vreshti Prime, and the air is cold the way archive air is always cold because memory does not like warmth. In front of you is a sealed black tile, no larger than your hand, and it contains the entire 40-year field record of one operative. The seal has not been broken in 11 cycles. Your hand is steady because your hands are always steady. That is how you were built. That is how you were trained. You are about to open the file of Operative Kellen Vorset, and you already know how the story ends. He did not come home. You are surrounded by 10,000 other tiles in this chamber, each one a life, each one a lesson, and not one of them is filed under the word that keeps surfacing in your mind as you reach for the seal. You do not have a word for what happened to Kellen. The closest human approximation, pulled from the very planet that took him, is the word unmade. He was unmade slowly. He was unmade tenderly. He was unmade by a Tuesday in October on a porch in a town of 4,000 people who never once suspected they were doing it. To understand what the galaxy's greatest spy feared most, you have to look away from the war rooms and the encrypted dossiers and the impossible disguises. His ultimate undoing was not a counterintelligence officer. It was not a slipped accent or a failed biometric scan. It was a waitress named Ruth who remembered how he liked his coffee. It was a fishing boat. It was a dog with a chewed ear who refused to leave his porch during a storm. Uncensored final reports, handwritten in a language he was never authorized to use, expose a quiet catastrophe no protocol could have prevented. So tell me, young keeper, what invisible force can break the mind of a being trained for 400 years not to have one? Before I unseal this tile, I want you to understand why I am telling you this story at all. Most of what you have been taught about Operative Kellen Vorset is wrong. The official line is that he was lost in the field. That is the polite term. Some of your instructors will have used a harsher one. They will have said he went native. They will have said he was weak. They will have said the Earth assignment was always cursed and that Kellen simply proved it. I am telling you the truth because you are about to take an oath, and oaths taken in ignorance are not oaths. They are decorations. You are old enough now to know that the Vreshkan are not feared in the spiral arm because we are violent. We are feared because we are patient. We can sit inside a target culture for a century and report on it without ever once being moved by it. That is the whole craft. That is the only craft. A operative is a mirror that walks. We reflect. We do not absorb. Kellen was the finest mirror we ever produced. 3 completed missions before Earth. The Kashtu reconstruction. The long infiltration of the Bellari merchant fleets. The 17-month operation inside the inner council of the Mawson, which ended without a single Mawson ever knowing he had been there. He filed 14,000 reports across those 3 assignments, and not one of them contained an unauthorized sensory detail. Not one of them used a comparative simile. Not one of them mentioned weather unless weather was tactically relevant. When the Earth file came up, the Council did not even debate. Kellen was 41 years old by their standard, which is to say barely past his second adulthood. He had 3 more centuries of field service in him. Earth was supposed to be a routine cultural survey. 6 months. Maybe a year. Establish cover, gather behavioral baseline data, exit clean. They picked him because they wanted it done correctly the first time. They picked him because he was the best. I want you to hold that in your mind, young keeper, while we walk through what happened next. He was the best we had, and the first thing that broke him was a mug of coffee. Let us dismantle the comfortable lie, because the comfortable lie is what gets young operatives killed. You will hear from your instructors that Kellen romanticized humanity, that he was always a little soft, a little too curious about target cultures, a little too willing to ask questions instead of just record. None of this is true. I have read every report he filed across 3 prior missions. He was, if anything, colder than his cohort. His Kashtu report on the executions at Hollow Reach was famous for its lack of affect. 240 deaths described in 17 sentences, every one of them structurally identical. His instructor at the time, Old Voss, used to read that report aloud to new recruits as an example of correct distance. This is what makes the Earth file so dangerous. Kellen did not arrive in Morro Bay, Oregon as a sentimentalist. He arrived as a scalpel. He had been surgically altered to present as a human male in his early 30s, 6 feet tall, brown hair, unremarkable features, the kind of face that slides off the eye. His cover name was Daniel Hark. His background was a drifter from inland, no family, no traceable history, the kind of biography that explains itself by being boring. He could mimic a human heartbeat. He could fake the slow protein decay we call aging. He could cry on command without producing a single neuropeptide we associate with grief. He chose Morro Bay because the council told him to choose it. Small coastal town, population just under 4,000, fishing economy, 1 traffic light, statistically irrelevant on every metric, which made it perfect. The kind of place you can observe humanity without humanity ever observing you back. That was the theory. We are going to walk through his 40 years on that coastline, 1 fracture at a time. I'm not going to skip the small things because the small things are what did it. If you want the big things, go read the war archives. If you want to understand how an empire's finest operative ended up declining extraction on a porch in the rain, you have to come down to the level of mugs and dogs and dead fishermen. You have to come down to the level where the war is actually fought. The first fracture was a mug of coffee, and it happened in his 3rd week on the planet. Daniel Hark walked into a diner called Ruth's on a Tuesday morning at 6:47, because operatives always arrive at off-peak hours during cover establishment. He sat at the counter. He ordered coffee, black, no sugar, in a mug. He asked for the mug to be heated first, because his altered biology ran slightly cold, and a lukewarm ceramic surface would have registered against his palm in a way a real human would not have noticed, but he would have. He paid in cash. He left a 12% tip, which his behavioral handbook had calculated as the statistically median tip for an unaccompanied male in a rural American diner in that decade. He came back the next day. He did the same thing. On the 3rd day, before he had even sat down, the woman behind the counter, whose name was Ruth Calloway and who was 46 years old and who had been running that diner for 19 years, looked up and said, "Morning, hun. I'll heat the mug." Kellen, who had stood inside the council chamber of the Mawson for 17 months without his pulse ever varying by more than 2 beats per minute, felt his pulse vary by 9. He sat down. He drank the coffee. He left the diner. He walked the half-mile back to the rented room he was using as a temporary base, and he opened his report tile, and he began to compose Field Note 41. Field Note 41 is in the archive. You can read it. I have read it many times. It is the first report Kellen Vorset ever filed in his career that contained a sentence with no tactical value. The sentence reads, in our language, "The ceramic was warmer than necessary." There is no follow-up. There is no analysis. He simply included it. He included a fact about a coffee mug because someone had remembered him, and he did not yet have the vocabulary to explain to himself why that mattered. He did not file a requesting extraction. Not yet. That comes later. What he did instead the next morning was come back to the diner, and the morning after that, and the morning after that, for 38 years. Ruth Calloway died in his 29th year on Earth. She was 75. He attended her funeral. He sat in the back. He did not file a report about it for 6 weeks, and when he finally did, the report was 11 words long. I will not repeat the words here. They are not for young keepers. The second fracture was a fishing boat, and it happened in his 6th year. By this point, Daniel Hark had built a stable cover. He worked part-time at the marina, doing light repairs, the kind of job that gave him an excuse to talk to a lot of people without being responsible for any of them. He was popular in the bland way drifters are popular in small towns. People liked that he didn't ask much and didn't say much. There was a fisherman named Earl Pasternak who docked at Slip 14. Earl was 63 years old, a widower, the kind of man whose hands had been ruined by saltwater so thoroughly that they looked like driftwood. His boat was called the Marlin, after his dead wife. Earl talked to his boat, out loud. He talked to it in the morning when he untied it, and in the evening when he tied it back up, and sometimes during the day when he thought no one could hear him. One afternoon in late August, Earl's winch jammed. He came up the dock looking for someone who could fix it. He found Daniel. Daniel followed him onto the boat. He had never been on a boat before. He had been on a frigate. He had been on a Void-class cruiser. He had ridden a thermal current down through the cloud cities of Pell. He had never stood on a small wooden thing that bobbed on water while a human in a yellow slicker handed him a wrench. He fixed the winch in 11 minutes. It was a simple mechanical problem, and Vreshkan operatives are trained in roughly 4,000 mechanical systems across 112 target cultures, and a marine winch was barely a system at all. But Earl had opened a thermos of coffee, and Earl had poured 2 cups, and Earl had sat down on a coil of rope and looked out at the gray water and said, "You ever lose somebody, son?" Daniel said no, which was true. Do not lose anybody. They reassign, they withdraw, they redeploy. The verb lose in our language requires a relationship the speaker has no control over ending, and Vreshkan relationships are always under control. Earl talked for 4 hours. He talked about Marlene. He talked about the kitchen tile she had picked out in 1971. He talked about the night she had stayed up with him through a stomach flu, holding a cold cloth to his forehead, even though she was the one with cancer and they both knew it. He talked about the smell of her hand cream. He talked about how he still set out 2 coffee cups every morning, and then poured the second one down the sink, because pouring it out felt like saying goodbye, and saying goodbye every morning was the closest he could get to keeping her. Daniel did not say anything for 4 hours. He just listened. When he got back to his rented room that night, he opened his report tile and he typed 3 words, and then he stopped, and then he typed 3 more, and then he stopped, and then he saved the report and submitted it. The report was titled Requesting Extraction. It said in full, requesting extraction, 6 months overdue, the target population, and then it ended. He never finished the sentence. The council did not respond. We have the internal records now. They received the report. They flagged it. They held a meeting. And then they decided by a vote of 7-2 to leave him in place and observe. This is the part of the story your instructors will not tell you. We did not lose Kellen. We watched him being lost. We made the choice to watch. The third fracture was a dog, and it happened in his 11th year. There was a storm in late October, the kind of storm that comes in off the Pacific in that part of Oregon, a wall of rain pushed by a wind that smells like cold iron. Daniel was in his rented house by then, a small 1-bedroom he had bought outright with the operational funds the council had stopped auditing. He was watching the rain through the kitchen window, because that is what his cover dictated a man like Daniel Hark would do on a Saturday night with nothing else to do. There was a dog on his porch. He had not invited the dog. The dog was a brown mutt, medium-sized, with one ear chewed down to a stump and a coat that was matted with mud. The dog was sitting on his porch just outside the rain line looking at the door, not scratching, not whining, just sitting. Daniel opened the door. The dog walked inside. Training is exhaustive. We are prepared for almost every contingency. We are prepared for ambushes, for romantic overtures, for false flag intelligence operations, for spontaneous religious revelations. We are not prepared for a wet dog to walk into our house without permission and lie down on the rug as if it has always lived there. Daniel stood in his kitchen for an hour. He did not move. The dog slept. In the morning, the dog was still there. Daniel went to the diner. He ate breakfast. He came home. The dog was still there. He bought a bag of dog food from the general store. He bought a metal bowl. He filled the bowl with water and set it on the kitchen floor. The dog drank. He named the dog Biscuit. He did not know why. Vreshkan operatives are not supposed to name things. Naming is a form of claim. Claim is a form of attachment. Attachment is a form of failure. He filed no report about the dog. Not for 9 years. There is no Vreshkan word for an animal chose me, and Kellen, who had been trained never to invent vocabulary, refused to invent it. The dog simply did not exist in the archive. Biscuit slept on the foot of his bed every night for 9 years. Biscuit followed him to the marina. Biscuit waited outside the diner. Biscuit got cancer in the spring of Daniel's 20th year on Earth, and Daniel sat on the kitchen floor for 11 hours holding the dog's head in his lap until the dog stopped breathing, and then he sat there for 3 more hours after that. The only entry in the archive from that week is a single line, filed in the wrong field under meteorological observations. The line reads, in our language, "The house is very quiet." That was the first time the council convened an emergency session about Kellen Vorset. The vote was closer this time, 5-4. They left him in place. They wanted to see what came next. The fourth fracture was a funeral, and it happened in his 19th year. Earl Pasternak died in March, a stroke. He was 76. He was found by the harbor master at 6 in the morning, slumped on the deck of the Marlene, one hand still on the wheel. He had been gone for maybe 2 hours. Earl had no children. Earl had no surviving siblings. Earl had a small group of friends from the marina, and at the center of that group, by accident of proximity and time, was a quiet drifter named Daniel Hark, who had been listening to Earl talk about his dead wife for 13 years. The harbor master came to Daniel's house. He asked Daniel if he would be a pallbearer. He asked Daniel if he would say a few words at the service. Daniel said yes to both. He said yes the way you say yes when you have run out of plausible reasons to say no. He spent 4 days writing the eulogy. There is no copy of it in the archive. He never transcribed it. He delivered it from memory at the small Methodist church on 8th Street, in front of 43 people, on a gray Thursday morning. He spoke for 11 minutes. Witnesses later described it as the most beautiful thing they had ever heard at a funeral, and most of them had been to a lot of funerals. He talked about Marlene's kitchen tile. He talked about the second coffee cup. He talked about a man who had stood on the deck of a boat for 40 years and said goodbye to his wife every morning, because saying goodbye every morning was the closest he could get to keeping her. He said that some loves were so big they could not be contained inside one person, and so they leaked out into the world, into boats and tile and coffee cups and the quiet patience of fishermen, and that the only proper response, when you encountered a love like that, was to stand still and let yourself be soaked by it. 43 people cried, so did he. The neuropeptides were real. He had not commanded them. He had not produced them. They had simply arrived. That night he filed requesting extraction 4. The report was 3 sentences long. The first sentence requested extraction. The second sentence stated the duration he had been overdue, which was now 18 years and 7 months. The third sentence was unfinished. It began with the words, "I do not know how to," and then it stopped. He submitted it anyway. The council voted 6-3 to leave him in place. A junior counselor named Venetror, who would later become the head of the Earth Desk, wrote a private dissent that I am going to read to you now, because it is the most honest sentence ever written about Kellen Vorset. The dissent reads, in our language, "We are no longer running an operation. We are watching a man die slowly into a different shape, and we are doing it because we are curious." The council overruled her. They were curious. The fifth fracture is not a single moment. The fifth fracture is the slow corruption of the reports themselves, and it happened across 13 years. I want you to understand what we are looking at when we look at Kellen's archive between his 22nd year on Earth and his 35th. This is the longest sustained stretch of any field record. It is also, by any technical measure, the worst body of intelligence work our service has ever received. The reports get shorter. This is the first sign. In his first year on Earth, Kellen averaged 41 reports per week, each one between 300 and 800 words long, all of them tactically dense. By his 25th year, he is filing one report per month, and the reports are sometimes less than 100 words. By his 30th year, he is filing one report per quarter. The reports also stop being about humans. This is the second sign, and it is stranger than the first. A field report is supposed to be a behavioral document. It is supposed to describe the target population. Kellen's reports in this period increasingly describe weather. They describe the smell of the marina at low tide. They describe a particular slant of light through the kitchen window at 4 in the afternoon in November. In year 27, he files a report that consists entirely of a recipe for clam chowder. The recipe is good. I have made it. That is not the point. The point is that he filed it. He filed it in the secure operational channel of a 4,000-year-old intelligence service, and he did it without explanation, and the council, by this point, was no longer even pretending to vote. The third sign is the language. Across these years, Kellen begins drifting between Vreshcon and English in his reports. By year 30, he is writing exclusively in English. By year 33, he is writing in a kind of English that is no longer the careful, surveilled English of an operative. It is the English of a man. It has cadence. It has, occasionally, jokes. There is a report from year 34 about a high school football game that contains the sentence, "The kicker missed wide left, and the whole town felt it in their chest," which is, I think, what a town is for. That sentence is not intelligence. That sentence is testimony. The council stopped responding to Kellen's reports somewhere around year 26. They did not recall him. They did not censure him. They simply read what he sent and filed it and said nothing. They were no longer his handlers. They were his audience. I want you to sit with that, young keeper. The most disciplined intelligence service in the Spiral Arm became, over the course of 13 years, a quiet readership for one man's slow conversion into a citizen of a town he was supposed to be observing. We did not break him. We watched him become. And then, in year 40, we sent someone to bring him home. The sixth fracture was the extraction itself, and it happened on a porch in October. Her name was Tevlin Yarrow. She was 62 years old, which by Vreshcon standards made her the equivalent of a human in her late 20s. She had been chosen because she had no prior contact with Kellen, no emotional attachment to the case, and a flawless field record across 2 prior missions. She was, in every sense, what Kellen had been 40 years earlier. The council chose her for the symmetry. The council was always choosing things for the symmetry. The ship dropped her in a cove 3 miles south of Merrow Bay on a Tuesday night in early October. She walked the coastline in the dark. She had been briefed for 9 months on the town, the cover, the operative, the protocols. She knew the layout of Daniel Hark's house. She knew which floorboard creaked. She knew the name of the dog he had buried in the backyard 11 years earlier, even though Kellen had never officially reported the dog's existence. We had reconstructed it from satellite imagery of the grave. She knocked on his door at 6:53 in the morning. He was already awake. He answered in a flannel shirt and jeans and bare feet. His hair was white by cosmetic protocol because Daniel Hark would have been 73 by then, and the cover had to hold to the end. He was holding a mug of coffee. She introduced herself in Vreshcon. She gave the recognition phrase. She told him she had come to bring him home. He invited her in. He poured her a cup of coffee. He asked her in English if she took it black. She did not know the protocol for that question because the protocol did not exist. She said yes. She did not know if she meant it. They sat at his kitchen table. The light through the window was the particular slant of light he had once described in a report, the 4 in the afternoon November light, except it was 6 in the morning in October, and the light was not the same, and she could not tell if he had been wrong in the report, or if she was wrong about the report now. Outside, in the backyard, she could see the small wooden marker over the grave of a dog named Biscuit. He listened to her briefing. He listened to the whole thing. She told him the ship was waiting. She told him the council had voted finally after 40 years to bring him home. She told him there would be no censure, no debriefing, no consequence. They wanted simply to have him back. He had been gone long enough. When she was finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said in English, "I appreciate you coming all this way." He said, "I'm not going back." He said, "I'd like you to take a report with you, though. If you would, it's the last one. I wrote it last week. I had a feeling." He stood up. He went into the next room. He came back with a single sheet of paper, folded twice, written by hand in English in pen. He gave it to her. He thanked her again. He walked her to the door. He told her the path back to the cove was easier if she followed the bluff instead of the beach, because the tide was coming in. He told her to be careful of the loose rock near the cypress tree. He told her his name had been Daniel for a long time now, and that he would be Daniel until the end, which he expected was not far off, because the cosmetic aging protocols were not designed to be reversed, and he had let them run. He did not say goodbye. He said, "Take care of yourself out there." He had picked that up from Earl 34 years earlier on the deck of a boat called the Marlene. He had used it for the first time in his life on a fellow Vreshkan operative on a porch in Oregon, and Tevlin Yarrow, who had been trained never to absorb a target culture, felt something move in her chest that she would later, in her own private notes, describe as a small warm displacement. She walked back to the cove. She boarded the ship. She brought the folded paper home. The final fracture is the report itself, and it is the reason I am telling you this story. I have it here. I have the original. The council did not destroy it, though they considered it. They placed it inside Kellen Vorset's archive tile, sealed it, and filed it under the designation Operational Anomaly, Case Closed. That designation is a lie of the kind the council specializes in. The case is not closed. The case is sitting in this chamber in front of you in my hand. The report is not intelligence. There is no actionable information in it. There is no analysis of human behavior, no tactical assessment, no recommendation for future operations. The council was, I think, expecting some kind of confession. They expected him to explain, to justify, to apologize. He did none of those things. What he did instead was list names. The report is 1 page long, written in English, in his careful handwriting, which had grown more human over the decades in ways our handwriting analysts still cannot fully explain. At the top of the page, he wrote a heading. The heading reads, "People who said my name and meant it." Below the heading is a list of 47 names. Ruth Calloway is on it. Earl Pasternak is on it. Biscuit is on it, which is technically a violation of the heading, because Biscuit was a dog and could not say a name, but Kellen included her anyway, with a small notation in parentheses that reads she came to the door when I called, and that counts. The harbor master is on it. The Methodist minister who let him deliver Earl's eulogy is on it. A girl named Sarah Chen who worked at the diner for one summer in 1997 and remembered, somehow, 3 years later, that he liked his mug heated is on it. A man named Robert Vasquez who fixed his roof in 2003 and called him by his first name on the way down the ladder is on it. There are children on the list, grown to adults by the time he wrote it. There are people who are dead. There are people who are still alive in Morro Bay today, who do not know they are inside a Vreshkan archive on the third moon of Vreshti Prime, sealed inside a black tile, in a chamber where the air is cold because memory does not like warmth. At the bottom of the list, below the 47th name, he wrote one sentence. It is the last sentence Kellen Vorset ever wrote in any language. It reads, "I was supposed to watch them, and instead they watched me and they did not look away," and that is the whole report. That is the whole report. I want to tell you what to take from this, young keeper, before you take your oath. I want to tell you what your instructors will not. The official lesson of the Kellen Vorset case, the one in your curriculum, is that Earth is forbidden to field operatives below the rank of senior archivist. You will be told this is because Earth is dangerous. You will be told this is because of the contamination risk. You will be told a great deal that is technically true and entirely beside the point. The actual lesson is this. There is a kind of weapon in the universe that we did not train for and cannot train for, because the weapon does not look like a weapon. It looks like a waitress who heats the mug. It looks like a fisherman who pours a second cup of coffee on a boat named after his dead wife. It looks like a dog who chooses your porch in the rain. It looks like 43 people in a small Methodist church who cry at a eulogy and assume you are one of them. Because by the time you deliver the eulogy, you are. The weapon is being known. That is all. It is being known by people who have no reason to know you, who gain nothing from knowing you, who would have lived their lives perfectly well if they had never known you, and who chose to know you anyway slowly over years, one mug of coffee at a time, until the version of you that existed before they knew you is no longer recoverable, no longer extractable, no longer real. Kellen Vorset was the best we ever produced. He was a mirror that walked, and the humans of Merrill Bay, Oregon, who never knew he was anything other than a quiet drifter named Daniel Hark, took that mirror down off the wall over 40 years and turned it around and made him look at himself, and what he saw, eventually, was a man. Not a Vreshcon operative in a man-shaped shell. A man, and he could not unsee it, and he did not want to. That is what they do, young keeper. That is the only thing they do. They will not invade your worlds. They will not break your codes. They will not, in any meaningful sense, even notice you. They will simply, if you stand still long enough, learn your coffee order. And once they know your coffee order, you are theirs. And you do not get to come home, because home has quietly relocated itself to a porch in October and a grave under a cypress tree, and a list of 47 names written in pen on a single sheet of paper. Do not go to Earth. That is the lesson, not because they will hurt you, because they will not. Because they will, instead, do the one thing they have spent 4,000 years training ourselves against, and they will do it without trying, and they will do it without knowing, and they will do it with such gentleness that by the time you understand what has happened to you, you will already, like Kellen, be holding a mug of coffee on a porch in the rain, watching a young operative walk back toward a ship you have no intention of boarding, and you will mean it when you tell her to take care of herself out there. Kellen Vorset died in Merrill Bay, Oregon, in the spring of his 42nd year on Earth. He was buried in the small cemetery on Pine Street, 3 rows behind Earl Pasternak, 4 rows behind Ruth Calloway. The headstone says Daniel Hark. There are flowers on it, even now, placed there by people who are not entirely sure why they keep going but who go anyway, because he was one of theirs, and they were one of his, and that is what a town is for. I am closing the file now. The seal will go back on the tile. You will take your oath in the morning. You will not be assigned to Earth. No one is anymore. But I wanted you to know his name, not the cover name, the real one, Kellen Vorset. Say it once before you leave this chamber. Say it the way Ruth Calloway would have said it if she had ever known it. Say it so that somewhere in whatever comes after for beings like us, he hears it and knows that the archive remembered. Then go. The air in here is cold, and memory does not like warmth, and you have a long life ahead of you, and there are still some places in this galaxy where you can be a mirror and not a man. Just not that one, never that one.